that. Good morning, seniors. We're going to try something new and try remote notes, essentially. I would encourage you to get out your Chapter 7, Section 1 questions, especially your chart. Feel free to annotate onto your homework if you don't want to copy everything down. Either way is fine. So let's start Chapter 7. So Chapter 7 is on market organization. This is still microeconomics. Unit 3 is our last unit within microeconomics. So let's start with the definition of market organization. Market organization, as you can see, is the amount of competition that exists among businesses within a certain industry. It can be either perfect competition, which is supply and demand determine price, or imperfect competition, which is supply and demand do not determine the price. Oligopolies, monopolistic competition, and monopolies all fall under imperfect competition. So let's start with our first one, and that would be perfect competition. As we go through the different characteristics of perfect competition, think of agriculture as our example. It makes it a little bit easier to understand all of the different characteristics. So with perfect competition, we have a large number of sellers in a particular industry, like farming. There are a large number of farmers. And within this industry, they sell an identical product. So think of potatoes. There's no branding that goes on. Part of the reason they don't brand is the product is identical. There's nothing to distinguish it from somebody else's potato. So there's no reason to give it a brand. With regards to how easy is it to become a farmer or to start a business as a farmer, this is going to be the easiest of all market organization types to enter and to exit. The costs in general are pretty low. If you wanted to find out information about your particular industry, for example, farming, you'd be able to get pretty complete information. Unfortunately, with perfect competition, you're not going to make a lot of profit because supply and demand determine price. They are considered to be farmers, for example, price takers. Whatever the market can bear, that'll be the price. They don't control price. Because of that, there's not a lot of profit to be made. When it comes to perfect competition, you cover all of your costs, so you break even. Marginal costs equal marginal revenue. Most people don't really associate, oh, I want to make a ton of money, I think I'll be a farmer. You can make a decent living, but you're not going to make an excessive amount of profit. So like we just said, best example is farming. An example that's fairly close might be stock market. The common product that they're selling is stock. It's the same because you get a piece of paper only saying that you have some type of ownership of a company. Our next type of market organization is monopolistic competition. With regards to monopolistic competition, let's think of clothing brands as our example as we run through the characteristics. There are a large number of sellers similar to a perfect competition situation, but there are less sellers in monopolistic competition than there are perfect competition. In monopolistic competition, these different companies sell what's known as a differentiated product. Think about clothing, and we can look at shirts. And a differentiated product might be a blue shirt made of cotton versus a red shirt made of silk, or a particular shirt that has a logo versus no logo. When it comes to monopolistic competition, we do see branding and advertising, and people will develop some type of a psychological connection to different brands, and we see that connected to price. Because there is brand loyalty within monopolistic competition, they do have some control over price. It's only some control because with monopolistic competition, you have a lot of competition. So you can't have your product significantly more expensive than everybody else's. There are too many substitutes for the consumer to move to. But we definitely see branding in this area. Is it fairly easy to get in? Yeah, the government regulations are pretty low. It's a little bit more expensive than perfect competition, but it's realistic to be able to get into monopolistic competition. The information is fairly complete, just as it is in perfect competition. In terms of being efficient, if you were a businessman or woman in monopolistic competition, you're going to need to be efficient because of the number of similar products to yours. Your product is very substitutable, and if you're not efficient and you have to raise your price to make up for your lack of efficiency, consumers can move to a very similar product than your own. Other examples other than clothing, for monopolistic competition, we also see shoes, athletic wear, and restaurants. Our next type of market organization is an oligopoly. In an oligopoly, we have a few sellers, and these sellers are interdependent. They rely on each other. They look at what the other is doing before making decisions. A good example of this would be the airline industry. And those few companies, they control 70 to 80% of the market. The other 20 to 30 can be made up of as many companies as possible. But it is 70 to 80 made up of a few. And they sell either an identical product or a differentiated product. Steel would be an example of an identical product. Differentiated, again, if you think about the different airlines, the different deals they have or policies about their luggage, whatever it happens to be, it's differentiated. This is a very difficult market organization to enter. There are a lot of trade secrets and a lot of brand name loyalty. So it's very hard to break into this. In terms of price control, they do have a great deal of price control because there aren't a lot of alternatives. So they exercise a lot of price control. In addition to not having a lot of alternatives, they also do a lot of advertising. So they develop brand loyalty and psychological beliefs of consumers about their product. Within an oligopoly, we have price leadership, where different companies pay attention to what their competitors are doing and they choose to follow the leader or not. For example, with our airlines, it might be the companion fees or friends fly free. A lot of times you'll see different airline industry companies doing very similar things. We also have collusion and cartels as part of an oligopoly. Both of these are illegal in the United States, but a collusion would be an informal decision by businesses within an industry to set price. A cartel is a formal group of companies that come together to set price. An example of a cartel would be OPEC and their control of the world oil market. So examples of oligopolies include the soda industry and banking, cereal. Okay. Our last type of market organization is a monopoly. Most of us are fairly familiar with this one, either because of the game or our US history classes. Monopolies, unless they're regulated by the government, we really don't see these in the United States. They are illegal. With a monopoly, we have one seller of a unique non-substitutable good. If it had a substitute, then you wouldn't have a monopoly. With monopolies, you're not going to be able to get in. Part of the way that these companies keep competitors out is new companies, if they try to enter the industry, the established monopoly will lower their prices until they run the other company out. Of all the types of market organization, this is where you're going to see the most control over price and the greatest potential for profit. They do not have 100% control over price. There is always that limit where consumers will say, it's not worth that much, I won't pay that. So they do have a great deal, but not 100% control. They do offer complete information with regards to their industry because they know you can't get in. So it really doesn't hurt them at all if there is information about their industry out there. So in terms of monopolies we've seen in our country, you guys might remember J.P. Morgan. We've got railroads. We had Rockefeller and Carnegie. Carnegie with steel, Rockefeller with oil. Nowadays, though, there are 4 types of legal monopolies within the United States. Technological monopolies are created by the government when they offer patents to companies. The reason they would offer a patent was to encourage innovation. Innovation is very expensive, and unless a company had a financial reason to invest this much money into innovation, they wouldn't do it. So to incentivize innovation, our government offers patents, copyrights, and trademarks. We also have geographical monopolies. This tends to happen in small areas where you just don't need multiple sellers of a good. If you think of a small town, they usually only have one grocery store, one cleaners, one gas station. That's all they need. So that would be where we see a geographical monopoly. There are less and less geographical monopolies over time due to online businesses. Because as you guys know, you can go online and pretty much buy whatever you like and have it shipped to you. A third type of legal monopoly in the United States is a natural monopoly. It's where our government has decided that competition is not practical and in fact causes wasteful duplication. The best way to understand this is to think about our utilities, that if anybody could open up a water company and a gas company, a cable company, how disruptive that would be. It would also be very dangerous having water lines and gas lines constantly being dug up and streets dug up. So our government has decided in this case it's better to have one person offering the service. This is also tied to the idea of economies of scale. As you guys know, we've been discussing how competition is good and it keeps prices down and quality up. In some cases, it's better to have one provider of a product and they can produce the product for cheaper. If you think about if you opened up your own water company, how much money you'd have to charge to be able to pay for that, it then becomes unrealistic to have multiple water companies. The last type of monopoly that we have is a government monopoly. Fairly self-explanatory. It's owned and operated by the government. The government provides these services, for example, the US Postal Service, because left alone, private industry would not do it. There's no money to be made running a post office. There's no money to be made having your own military. So that's where a government monopoly would fit in. So our technological monopolies, our geographic monopolies are small towns. Our natural monopolies are utilities. And then our government monopolies, stuff such as the post office, our national defense, and then also weapons grade uranium. So that is the end of our section 1 notes, and we'll pick up in a separate video on section 2.